Welcome to the Old Iron Lover channel. My name is Bob, and today's video is going to be the first video we put up. It's going to be an introduction to myself, and then we'll take a tour of the shop. What got me started on this was when Derry stopped by and did one of his on the road videos. I got a lot of comments back that people wanted to see more of the shop, so we're going to do that. We're going to do that in more detail. So first, a little bit about me. I'm an engineer, mining engineer by education, and part of my career I did a lot of software development and high-end server builds and all that. About a year and a half ago I retired, and now I'm doing stuff I really enjoy. So my history is I kind of got started in this sort of metalworking and antique engines and all that sort of stuff when I was about 17 years old. We got transferred from Wyoming to Denver, and in that transfer it was between my junior and senior years of high school. So for that whole summer I was in a new town, didn't know anybody, and there was an old fella living across the street that had just retired. I went over to visit him and just see what all the noise was over there, and I was introduced to what would become my mentor for about 40 years, 44 years to be exact. Anyway, Roy was his name, had a little machine shop, had a mill and a lathe, and he had a lot of equipment for rebuilding engines, restoring antique cars. He specialized in working on magnetos. Anyway, he took me under his wing and started teaching me things for that whole summer, and I spent on and off throughout my career. When I had a chance to stop by Denver and learn something else, that's what I did. It was wonderful. I can't thank Roy enough. He got along well until he was in his late 90s. He was 98 years old when I last saw him out working on equipment. He was actually on top of a forklift trying to swing a sledgehammer and knock some bolts out of the top of the lift frame. And I said, "Roy, why don't you let me climb up there and do that?" And he said, "Okay." And so I knocked him out for him. Anyway, he was real active up until he started developing some circulatory problems, and he wanted the lathe, the milling machine, and all of his equipment to go somewhere good, and I had been with him all these years, and so it was a natural fit that I would buy him out. So after he had been a year without stepping foot into his shop, I knew he was not going to do any more in the shop. And at that point, I bought his equipment from him, and when he turned 100, he passed away, and so I miss him. He was a wonderful guy, a wonderful mentor, and had so many great stories to tell about his life. Among other things, he was a trainer for Sun Corporation in the late 40s. So he was the factory rep that came around and showed you how to run the machines and how to get the best out of them, things like that. That kind of was the sort of thing he taught me as well, is how to get the best out of your machines and all that. So anyway, the lathe you see behind me here is his lathe. We're going to start our tour with this lathe. He bought it in 1957, and he bought it from M.L. Foss, and the factory tag is still, I'll show you this in a minute, is still on the machine. And it was from the card you get from South Bend, the birth certificate, it was a 1954 lathe. It's a South Bend 13-inch. It's got about 33 inches center to center, and it's pretty much an old school lathe. And it kind of harkens back to the name of the channel, Old Iron Lover. You're going to see a lot of things in my shop that talk about old iron. So, and by the way, there's not a thing wrong with old iron. It's good stuff. It might get a little wear on it. In this case, these machines are in pretty good shape. But part of being a machinist is learning how to accommodate or compensate for where the machine has some looseness or something going on that isn't giving you quite perfect results. you can get real good results with this lathe. It's just in very good shape. And when I first got it, I took it apart. All the parts that you see that have been painted are parts that I took apart when I got it. The parts that you see, like the apron here, I didn't take the apron apart. So anyway, I inspected the spindle bearings and the gearing and oiled everything, cleaned everything, and put it all back together because there wasn't a thing wrong with it. And I've been using it for years since. I've added some other features to it, but I'm going to step out of the frame and start showing you some of the features of the lathe as it sits now and things I might have done to it after Roy had it. Okay, this is the lathe as I received it and as I've made a few modifications to it. The few things I've added to it along the way were just for my convenience. It wasn't that there was anything wrong with what was going on before. The lathe came with a lantern style tool holder, and Roy used that thing. It was fluid motion when he put a tool in there and clamped it down. I found it to be kind of wobbly, and I just didn't. It wasn't as solid or as easy to use as I would like. So I have an Aloris tool holder in here. Up until recently, I had an import tool holder, and I just wanted to get something a little more solid and repeatable. So that one I really like. I've got, as you can see on the back wall there, a number of tool holders for it. A few of them, the newer ones, are Aloris tool holders, but the rest are imports that work fairly well. They're kind of inconsistent. I've had to machine them a little bit so when I'm locking the handle in place, it's coming in the same place each time when I lock the tools in. Another thing I added to it was the drawbar here for the collets, and this is homemade. On the right here you see the collets that I've accumulated over the last several years. eBay and whatever else I could find. I'd get collets that were the right size, and then if I got some better ones, I would swap them out, and eventually there is actually a full set of 72 collets there, from a 1/64 of an inch up to an 1 1/8. They're all hard inch, and I've gotten rid of all my spares, so now this is my full collet set. The lathe came with a whole bunch of tool bits here, probably a lifetime supply, and I haven't even begun to dip into them. And also, as I was accumulating the 5C hard-inch collets, I pretty much put together a good set of squares and hex collets as well, and I think most of these are hard-inch as well. And in the process, I also got a bunch of machinable collets and just different odds and ends inside collets and so on. They were all basically free, so why not keep them? So here's a close-up of the tool holder rack that I built to hold all these tool holders. As I mentioned, I couldn't see what I had. Well, now that I've got them oriented and hanging in these racks, I can see exactly what's in each of them, whether it's set for facing or for turning, whatever. Basically, it's just a bar of aluminum. It's made so that there's a dovetail here that matches the dovetail on the tool holder. The bottom is machined flat, so we just set it in and drop it. It fits in perfectly. If you try to grab it the wrong way, it's not going to fall off. Very good way to keep them in shape, and I don't know what took me so long to do it. Swinging a little bit to the right of the lathe now. I've got a shop vac that we got at a Goodwill store for $15, and it turned out to be brand new, and it's a wall mount. So I thought, well, I kind of used up a lot of karma that day. The other thing in here is a Harbor Freight hoist I used to have in the back of my pickup. But I got to put a Tommy lift on the pickup and put the hoist in here, sitting on top of an old column from a drill, an imported drill that stopped working. Well, it broke. So throughout this, I'm going to try to point out various accommodations and adjustments I made to being older, and as I get older, it's harder to lift heavy objects, and that was actually the subject of Dale Derry's video that he did when he came by, as my chuck holders that he used to mount the chucks on the lathe. So this thing will swing very nicely to reach both the lathes, which I don't need to do very often, and to hit the Bridgeport mill here. So if I need to move a dividing head or a rotary table or something onto that, or a heavy piece of steel, it's easy just to grab it with this and put it up there. Got an inexpensive tool grinder, but it serves my purposes. It's just for kind of cleaning up or reshaping a tool or whatever. I don't have a diamond wheel on it. I just use a hand hone to hone them. Okay, all of my air stations are set up similarly. I got 4 of them in the shop. Each one has a master shutoff valve that shuts everything off, most everything off. Each individual blow-off valve or whatever I have has its own shutoff. So I have a blow-off hose for if I want to clean out a chuck or something. I have a blow-off hose for the mill. I tend to clean up with the shop vac. I don't blow chips around, but once in a while you got to get something out of a hole or whatever. It's nice to have the air right here. And the third one has got its own regulator, and that is for a Noga mini cool that I haven't completely installed yet, but I'm getting close. This is the Bridgeport mill. It's a Series 1 J-head mill. It's got a 1-horse 3-phase motor in it. We'll talk about the accommodations to that in a minute. When I got this mill, I bought it from a guy who, I don't know how many times it changed hands, but it started out at East High School in Denver in their shops back in the day when they still had shop classes in schools. The mill itself is a 1969 model, and I don't know how long it was in the shop. It is, I'm sure you all share the same sentiment that it's a great loss to the nation to not have these kind of schools in prevalence like they used to be. There are still a few around. Tubalcain has been showing some videos in his old shop when he goes back to help out, substitute. They still have some of these shops around, but they're just not around much anymore. It's not available to the average high school kid. When I got this, I tore it completely down to the bare metal, painted everything, adjusted everything, replaced the broken parts or loose parts or any of that stuff, put it in good shape, as good as I could without regrinding the ways or anything like that. So I did add a vise to it. This is an older D60 Kurt vise. It serves me very well. It seems to be reasonably accurate, and I have no complaints about it at all. On further down, just recently, and I'll have a video on this shortly, is I added a knee drive on it. This is just a Chinese knee drive that works fairly well. I think it's a little underpowered. I may wind up having to move it to the Y-axis and buying a heavier one for the knee, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But for now, it works fine. Wasn't that tough to install once I figured out the Chinese instructions, or the lack thereof. Most of it I had to kind of make up as I went along. I mentioned that this was a 1-horse 3-phase mill, and I'm not going to go chase another motor down for it because they are a special pancake motor. But and then there's probably other motors that would fit, but I just don't want to be dealing with that. I bought an inexpensive Chinese with an English sounding name VFD. It's a 1-horse VFD. It's a 1-horse motor. I've never had any trouble with it. The actual brand name, I think you can see it in the picture there, is Bedford, and it looks just fine. I built the pendant for it, just the basic stop-start and speed control, and the black knob, second from the bottom, is a forward and reverse. Never had any complaints once I put it together. Again, I bought this from, I didn't realize I was buying it from China, but the switches and things inside of this were $3 switches, and they work just fine. the mill itself has some heavier duty switches on it from back when, but the VFD doesn't require much in the way of heavy duty switches or anything with it, so it's just any light switch will work fine. Several years ago I decided I wanted a smoother feed on the X-Drive, get more consistent cuts and things, and so I got another Chinese power feed, and this one's an Align. I'm pretty sure from what I read and heard, Align and a Song are both made by the Song brothers in China, and they're in the same factory and all that. I can't recall the instructions, like I said, it's been several years, but it works great. I really haven't had any problems at all. One other feature I wanted to show was the one-shot lube I added to it. It has the original Zerks on it, and some guys plug those when they put the one-shots in, but I thought it's not hurting anything, doesn't cost anything, I'll just leave it on. And I do have the Lincoln one-shot lube gun, or the oil gun, not the grease gun. I can manually lube it if I want to add a little more. Most of the components in there are just basic off-the-shelf components that I got from, I think it was an equipment rebuilder that sells these pieces. The actual pump is an imported one, and it was just a whole lot cheaper than an actual Beecher pump. Works good. I really haven't had any problem with it. When I touch the surfaces that are supposed to be oily, they're oily. This is Nichols hand miller. This also came from my old mentor Roy's shop. He bought it from the original owner, who bought it, we think, around 1957 or in that 1957 and 1960 time frame somewhere. The gentleman that bought it new, and got sick shortly afterwards and didn't use it for much. And after the original owner died, Roy bought it, and so he was the second owner, and then I bought it from Roy, so I'm the third owner. I've had it, part way apart, been through it, looked at everything, cleaned it. Again, it was in really, really good shape. There's absolutely no wear on anything. Just top-notch shape. If you're unfamiliar with the Nichols hand miller, it's kind of an interesting device. It's a horizontal mill, and honestly, I don't use it much. But, and neither did Roy. The 44 years I was hanging out in his shop on and off, I probably saw him use it a couple times. But before I knew him, he used it to make gears, and the story was that he told me was that he built a transmission for a race car that raced on the Pikes Peak Hill Climb. And that would be a long time ago, so it would not be the sophisticated cars that we have now. But and that's what I use it for, is mostly either cutting gears or put a slab mill in there and slab mill a block down to flat with one pass. The way the Nichols hand miller is built is it's designed to have repetitive motion, and they consider it in the manual for kind of a low production, small run production machine. And to that end, it has a rack and pinion drive on it that you can fairly quickly move back and forth. You can set the stops to get whatever limits you need, and then the vertical also will move up and down, and you can set the stops for how to control it. And you can also lock both motions. As an overarm, and with the overarm I have a 1-inch and a 7/8 inch arbor for it, and the thing came with a lot of tooling, and we'll show that in a little while. It also, you can pull this piece of the overarm out of the way and just do the stub shaft in here with some mills, whatever description. It came with the little vise here. It's at number 22, and I want to say it's a brown and sharp, but I'm not positive. I can't see the casting numbers on it anymore. But it says number 22 on top, and all I remember about it is it's a brand name vise. It has the angle plate on it, so I can turn it and set it to any degree I want. Not much to it other than that. It's just a real straightforward little mill. Got a dial on the y-axis I don't have the crank for the Z-axis on there, but it's there. All those motions are nice and smooth. They run great. It had a little bit of swarf laying around on it. I kind of cleaned it up, and I put more of my own swarf on it. But I can't find any complaints really. And here's a drawer full of cutters that came with the Nichols mill. There's a little set of involute cutters, a whole bunch of slitting saws, some staggered tooth cutters, some shell mills, a big old slab mill there. There's a quarter round cutter, a whole set of those, and there's some half round. And there's also a set of square and hex blocks that work with either mill, of course. Here's a collection of NBT40 tooling for the Nichols mill. There's a collet set there, and I'm not sure that I have the collet holders for it, but I believe I do. And there's a big old shell mill and just miscellaneous odds and ends. We're back now at the Sears Craftsman vertical bandsaw. Okay, we're still, this is still the old iron lover channel, and some more old iron here. This is a Sears Craftsman vertical bandsaw, and it was made by King Sealy in the probably mid-50s. It's a great old machine. It works fine. I put new bands on it, or new tires on it just recently, and I'll show you an adjustment I had to make because it was a wood bandsaw, and I converted it to metal. It had to be slowed down quite a bit, but it works great. Never any problems with it. Derry showed me a trick on how to adjust the tracking a little easier. You have to dig that out of one of his videos, and he has a whole video on setting up bandsaw. So we're going to switch to the other side here and take a look at the drive side. I did make a couple of modifications, as I mentioned. One of them was the drive system. The other one was a little pair of air nozzles here. They sit right in front of the blade, so that as I'm cutting things that I've got layout lines on, I can actually see them because it blows all the dust and stuff out of the way. The little air nozzles are powered by a inexpensive aquarium pump that does a great job. It just kind of puffs everything out of the way. As I mentioned, when I got this, it was a bandsaw for wood, and I needed a bandsaw for steel. So I added a double reduction here. Motor drives the big pulley drives a little pulley. It's attached to a little pulley, and it runs this belt that runs the main band, the tires and whatnot inside the saw. And so I had to put some framework in it, and these wheels are all adjustable to get the right tension on the belt. It seems to work. It could probably go a little faster, but I'm not going to change it now.